Hello, my name is Aaron Dobbs. I'm in Learning Community Group 2, and I will be presenting from Valerie Hill Jackson and Delia Stafford's anthology, Better Teachers, Better Schools, What Star Teachers Know, Believe, and Do. I am presenting Chapter 5, which is Character is Destiny, My Journey to Becoming a Star Teacher. So, the purpose of this chapter is to do three things. First off, it's to identify the characteristics of a star teacher's beliefs, what internal passions and motivations work for them. Secondly, it's to consider how reflection and self-awareness of one's life history can provide insight into one's character. And finally, the purpose of this chapter is to look at how closely the author's core beliefs are to Haberman's 7 mid-range functions. Speaking of the author, this chapter is written in the anthology by Cherise Mitchell, and for that third objective, we're looking for Cherise specifically. She's doing some self-reflection to see how she lines up with the 7 characteristics of Haberman's mid-range functions and the extent to which she follows them in such making her a star teacher. So, the process by which one can make that evaluative judgment is through self-reflection, through charting how one has actively and proactively, and additionally retroactively, looked at what they can learn from trying to adapt and fit those models prescribed by Haberman, and seeing how they have translated that to the classroom. Mitchell says throughout the chapter that a major part of being a star teacher is adaptability, and because education is a moving target, because you're working with at-risk youth, teachers need to understand that if you're going to work in this environment, you constantly have to recalibrate, reload, adapt, and adjust. Her purpose specifically is to identify what personal strengths she has, beginning all the way from her childhood and her discussions with her, how her father inculcated a sense of honesty in her, and translating that through her time as a teacher in private, parochial, and charter schools, all the way from K through community college, and how well and successful she's been in doing that. So, one of the major ideas that the author looks at is Haberman's quote, "Miseducation is, in effect, a sentence of death carried out daily over a lifetime." The idea that, this reflects the Frederick Douglass quote, "It's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men." The idea that you should do this the right time, that the first time is the time worth doing something correctly. If you are not doing something correctly, you're stealing time, or you're stealing effort, your focus, opportunity, in that you're holding someone down, and you're basically preparing them for a life not worth living. So, this major quote is what inspires Mitchell's perspective and approach to the 7 mid-range functions. The mid-range functions, now these are not them, but these are what these mid-range functions are meant to instill upon any kind of star teacher, and they all relate to these different philosophies of accountability, honesty, protection, empathy, high standards, and a teacher recognizing their own fallibility. So the 7 mid-range functions. First, we've got core functions and descriptions. The first is approach to at-risk students. A teacher has to understand that if they're going to be working with at-risk youth, they need to be cognizant of the fact that it's teacher responsibility to ignite a desire, that teachers have to work hard with these students if they want to create a sense of hardworkingness, and not to push edutainment, but to push a certain kind of inspiration that's intrinsic. Teachers must be persistent. They have to constantly be looking for best practices, willing to adapt. They must protect students' learning. They're looking to expand the curriculum by acknowledging student wants. Teachers need to be courteous and patient. They need to take child input and try and merge that into the curriculum so that we can tailor a learning strategy path the student has to buy into. Teachers need to admit their own fallibility. When they make a mistake, I made a mistake. Teachers need to be very professional, whilst maintaining some, personal touch and the like. But having an authentic respect for students goes a long way. One of the ways is that teachers avoid burnout is they basically understand how to navigate the bureaucracy through stress management and finding quality support in other teachers. And finally, translating the conceptual to operational, putting theory into practice, basically clearly enumerating how they're going to do something, and then executing that plan. So, approach to at-risk students. Teachers need to ignite the desire to learn in students. The idea that a teacher cannot control everything. A teacher is going to have to improvise. A teacher is going to have to take student want into consideration. A teacher is going to have to accommodate certain things that are outside of their control, and they're going to have to try and inspire and motivate a student who otherwise might have some difficulties because of what's going on at home. The teacher needs to take on a little bit of extra responsibility. Persistence. Big part of this is, just looking for best practices, always staying up with personal development, making sure that the teacher understands the most effective forms of classroom engagement. Teachers that use direct instruction need to be persistent in maintaining student engagement. Now, direct instruction in this case does not mean drill and kill. And then finally, teachers need to look at their GT students and understand what their strengths are and make some accommodations to make sure that those students are being pushed as hard as far as possible. Protections of student learning. One of the ways to protect student learning is to protect student engagement, is to try and facilitate things that are going to make the student inspired to come to the classroom, to want to learn, to give the student the burden of desire. Eventually needs to be transitioned to the student, but a teacher might have to come up with some creative strategies that look beyond the textbook, beyond the instructional materials as they are written, and incorporate some things whereby the teacher has created to garner student interest or something like that. Fallibility. If a teacher makes a mistake, a teacher needs to just recognize, hey, I made that mistake. You know what? I didn't talk to you in the most respectful way. Hey, yeah, I was short with you, or I let my temper get the best of me. Teachers need to communicate that with parents. They need to admit their mistakes. It's part of the self-reflection process. It's how you grow, and it's how you hopefully have a larger threshold for patience and for anything else where you might make a mistake whilst in the classroom. So the professional versus personal orientation. STAR teachers expect all children to have the capacity to learn and do not take children's misbehavior as a personal attack. This is the idea where teachers need to find preventative solutions when it comes to dealing with students. Teachers in schools serving children in poverty, they have to abide by the idea that Haberman puts forth in this gentle teaching. When teachers really bite down, and this is what I've seen in my case, you are initiating an arms race, and you might win the battle, you might win the war, and you might get your way. But what you probably won't get in doing an arms race is getting a student to succeed. It's very easy to prove yourself right, but then it's very hard to say, well, what did that really accomplish? To what end did you really help a student? And that's the ultimate goal. So gentle teaching, while it might seem counterintuitive to some teachers when they're presented with a very risky situation or bad situation, is something that is a strategy that at least keeps students in the community and learning. Some characteristics of STAR teachers. Additionally, for professional STAR teachers, they're people who are able to listen. And these are also STAR teachers who incorporate personal cues that kind of they're able to balance the professionalism with some courteous human emotion. They listen. They teach alternate skills. They look, hey, does this specific student need an accommodation? They allow themselves to be only as vulnerable so that students can see that they're a person too. They have feelings, because when you're modeling positive behavior, showing who you are as a person is going to give students a little more buy-in. They know that you're a kind of person like them who cares. And teachers who are being proactive instead of being reactive. That's something additionally that's a professionalism trait, being able to anticipate a problem and head it off at the pass before it manifests into a huge issue. So, something to prevent teacher burnout is the idea of teachers looking for support systems so that they are able to survive in the abyss that is teacher bureaucracy. Mitchell puts forward the recommendation that teachers need to create a community of learners. You have this cohort of your colleagues where you listen to each other, you share, you get some things off your chest. Again, going to the teacher's lounge, the goal there is not to get everyone whipped up into a complaint feeding frenzy. Rather, it's to strategize on how we can de-stress and tackle current situations. And finally, Mitchell's prescriptions when it comes to transferring from the conceptual stage to the operational stage is when she discussed Haberman's putting theory into practice. And the way that this is done is just by translating teaching theory into practice. The idea is, you lay out your lesson plan and you try and execute it as best as possible. You envision something in your mind's eye, you try and translate it. If it doesn't go the way you wanted it to go, you make some changes. Then you try it again, and the same kind of process with a different content structure, and it's a continual refinement process. Plan, execute, debrief, change, replan, execute, debrief, change, etc. That cyclical process. Another thing that Mitchell also prescribes to save some time and to balance off each other is to work with mentor and mentee teachers so that collaboratively as a group you can kind of see what's working and what's not working, so you guys can brainstorm and work to feed off of each other and build on what works and what doesn't. So finally, what are some characteristics of successful STAR teachers? Ongoing professional development, always wanting to get better, knowing that, again, at-risk education is a moving target. You're going to have to improvise. You're going to have to change things up. The curriculum is not locked in. Always willing to grow and work harder. Being able to take responsible risks, try something out. If it doesn't work, understand why it didn't work, go back to the drawing board and try something else new. Some kind of experiential learning that's going to inculcate desire in a student. And then finally, oversee student self-reflection and your own self-reflection. But really try to get students to look at themselves. Self-reflection for the teacher is great. Self-reflection for the student is also great as well. So, thank you. My name is Aaron Dobbs. This has been a presentation of Chapter 5.